When we look back at the Third Reich, the enduring image is one of absolute terrifying order. We picture an unstoppable machine, driven by ruthless discipline and cold efficiency. But that perception of a perfectly synchronized society was a meticulous illusion. It was a narrative crafted by state propagandists to project strength to their enemies and maintain psychological control over their own citizens. Strip away the staged rallies and the curated broadcasts, and the actual day-to-day operation of the regime was a chaotic mess, managed by incompetent men and propped up by bizarre hypocrisies. Leaving that myth of invincibility unquestioned gives their ideology a power it never actually earned. To truly understand the collapse of Germany, we have to expose the absurdity humming right beneath the surface. We need to stop taking the fascists at their word, look past the banners, and examine the frankly embarrassing reality of the men who built them. Take the supreme leader himself. State media painted Adolf Hitler as a tireless, ascetic teenness. In reality, the man struggled to spell and typed so poorly that while in prison, he had to dictate his manifesto, Mein Kampf, to his supporters, who then heavily edited the text just to make it readable. His personal discipline was equally pathetic. Hitler was a notorious late riser who rarely dragged himself out of bed before 11 a.m., preferring to stay up into the early hours watching Hollywood movies. This terrible habit had massive strategic consequences. On the morning of June 6, 1944, as Allied forces launched the D-Day invasion, Hitler was sound asleep. His generals were too terrified to wake him, paralyzing the military response for several crucial hours, while thousands of troops landed in Normandy. Behind closed doors, his physical health was rapidly deteriorating due to an extreme sugar addiction. He would shovel spoonfuls of sugar into his wine, eat up to a kilogram of chocolate in a single day, and notoriously stuffed himself with cream cakes in his bunker while Soviet tanks rolled into Berlin. To cope with his failing body, he relied on his personal doctor, Theodor Morell, who pumped him full of experimental drugs. Hitler received dozens of daily injections containing everything from methamphetamine and morphine to highly toxic substances like strychnine. The man demanding absolute perfection from an entire continent was, in truth, a lazy, drug-addicted shut-in whose personal incompetence actively sabotaged his own armed forces. This dysfunction extended directly into their core ideology, the obsession with breeding a genetically flawless, pure Aryan race, enforced by ruthless legislation. The so-called science behind these laws was incredibly fragile. In 1935, a major propaganda magazine ran a contest to find the ultimate poster child for Nordic perfection. The winning 6-month-old, personally selected by Joseph Goebbels to represent their master race, was actually the daughter of Latvian Jewish immigrants. Her photographers secretly submitted the picture purely as a joke to mock the regime's racial standards. The architects of these laws blatantly ignored them whenever it suited their personal needs. Hitler specifically intervened to protect his own Jewish family doctor, and when the SS tried to purge his personal driver over his Jewish ancestry, Hitler simply granted him an exemption as an honorary Aryan. The hypocrisy bordered on the surreal. While implementing the industrial slaughter of millions of humans, the government passed some of the strictest animal welfare laws on Earth. High-ranking officials like Hermann Goering proudly threatened anyone who mistreated an animal with immediate deportation to a concentration camp. There was no rigid scientific doctrine at play. It was an arbitrary framework of brutal restrictions that the elite routinely discarded the moment they became inconvenient. The state also tried forcing this fractured reality onto the broader culture, going so far as attempting to completely rewrite the traditional Christmas holidays. Party officials ordered the removal of Christianity's Jewish roots, replacing St. Nicholas with the Norse god Odin, banning six-pointed stars, and encouraging families to top their trees with swastikas instead. They applied this same clumsy control to fine art. In 1937, they opened the Degenerate Art Exhibition in Munich. They hung avant-garde pieces in chaotic rooms alongside insulting graffiti, explicitly instructing the public what art to hate. The plan backfired spectacularly. The mocked exhibition attracted over 2 million visitors, 5 times the crowd at the state-approved gallery next door. Even with total control over the police, the press, and the schools, the leadership routinely failed to make the German public genuinely embrace their manufactured delusions. That reliance on delusion and chemical enhancement wasn't limited to the Führer's bunker. The seemingly unstoppable momentum of the early war, the famous Blitzkrieg, was heavily fueled by narcotics. The military distributed millions of tablets of Pervitin, an early form of methamphetamine, to frontline troops. It eliminated the need for sleep and generated intense bursts of energy, trading sustainable long-term military strategy for a frantic chemical-induced mania. The absurdity of the entire enterprise was perhaps most clearly recognized by Hitler's own bloodline. His nephew, William Patrick Hitler, saw exactly where this madness was heading, fled to the United States, and actually enlisted in the U.S. Navy to fight against his uncle's regime. The Third Reich was never the disciplined, mechanical juggernaut its propaganda claimed. It was a deeply fragile, hypocritical mafia built on erratic behavior, extreme drug abuse, and rigid laws that the creators themselves couldn't follow. A chaotic system that ultimately engineered its own collapse.